The budget restriction was designed to ensure equality in Formula One. However, by the third year, it is clear that there are too many loopholes through which only the best teams benefit. Let's show how the development was hidden from the finance books and how the teams are cheating in the cost cap era. The concept was good, but implementation proved tough. The budget cap was expected to tackle Formula One's main issue. The new rights holders in the United States happily adopted Max Mosley's old concept and implemented it, like pay limitations in the main US professional leagues, to ensure greater equality of opportunity. The disparity in team circumstances in Formula One was extremely unfair. The wealthy racing teams not only had the greatest people, but also a larger number of them. It was the equivalent of allowing 4 or 5 drivers on track as opposed to 1 for the smaller teams in terms of personnel numbers. As a result, only drivers from Mercedes, Ferrari or Red Bull won a Grand Prix between 2013 and 2020. Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri was the first surprise winner at Monza in 8 years. In the long term, no sport can tolerate so much predictability. This predictability has resulted in multiple dominations over the last decade, which was great for that team's fans, but less great for the rest of the F1 fans. So the FIA implemented a budget cap in 2021 with the aid of the COVID crisis, which was initially set at $145 million and has now achieved its goal of achieving $135 million since the beginning of 2023. With all the allowances for extra races and sprint weekends, as well as inflation compensation, the teams are permitted to spend almost $153 million, which are peanuts in comparison to earlier years, where we would easily see the top 3 teams spending $400 or $500 million each year just to stay on top. But now they must abide to the new system, so the racing teams quickly became friends with the new structure after being forced to manage under financial constraints. This also had a plus side for the teams in terms of worth, because it made their license more valuable. Formula One is now a lucrative company in the eyes of the outside world, making it appealing to investors. A great example, Alpine just sold a quarter of their racing team for €200 million. If all teams committed to conserving money, the cost cap would be a significant step towards greater equality of opportunity. However, the 2022 and 2021 seasons have already demonstrated that there are flaws in this discipline as well. Red Bull sought them out and discovered them. Because the maximum was exceeded by £1.8 million, and the racing team was fined $7 million and had to accept 10% less wind tunnel time, Aston Martin was fined $450,000 for providing inaccurate information during the cost review. The audit results were only revealed to the teams in October. The FIA justified its actions by citing a shortage of personnel. There were 3 auditors for 10 teams in 2022, and some of them were sailing right up against the wind. It's in this sport's DNA to push the limits everywhere and take any opportunity to hide costs. The Department of Finance, headed by Federico Lodi, was enlarged to 10 people in order to speed up the auditing process and better track out offenders. Since the end of March, the auditors have taken on 2 teams per month, going through the books, conducting interviews, having mail traffic or WhatsApp messages shown to them, or even showing up unannounced at the factory with uncomfortable questions to see if the business reports submitted by the teams corresponded to the facts. The audit was scheduled to be completed by the end of July. Those suspected of exceeding the limit will be visited again by FIA officers in August. All teams will be formally informed of findings in early September. There are already reports in the paddock that at least 2 teams are being investigated for going too far. But that's not all. As you know, cheating has become a common theme in F1, and misusing the cost cap is the newest additions to cheatable regulations. The investigations revealed that there were many more grey areas that were and are being utilised by the top teams. That is why, on April 19th, Lodi and FIA Technical Director Tim Goss issued Technical Directive TD045, which is designed to put a halt to some of the discovered deception. The teams, on the other hand, are always one step ahead of the rulemakers. A typical solution is to divide the core business into several legally separate firms that then construct boats, motorcycles, or crazy supercars for the road. Many engineers can be parked in this manner who would otherwise relocate to other teams or industries for greater advancement opportunities or higher compensation. These personnel then work just 10%, 25% or 50% for the Formula One team, and their pay was decreased accordingly in the F1 cost center. The teams then formed new corporations to outsource certain services. The teams then purchased from these external enterprises at a cheaper cost than they would have paid if they'd done it themselves. Smart way to get around the rules, right? Mercedes installed a software firm that primarily serves Mercedes. Aston Martin has a carbon factory that manufactures carbon fiber components in-house, although it is a company inside a corporation. It supplies the Formula 1 racing team at a low cost. It is nevertheless beneficial for the staff to work for this subcontractor, since it is still permitted to accept outside orders outside of peak periods, which increases the bank account. The development department might employ the same model. They could sell new advancements to the team for a set fee, which would be significantly more if they had to manufacture them themselves, because all unsuccessful developments are excluded from the predetermined price. The TD045 is now meant to avoid such abuses in the future. Now though, a new technique has emerged that is almost impossible to nail down. In principle, only Red Bull and Aston Martin may use it at this point, but if the FIA does not find a solution, it might become the standard. Red Bull Advanced Technologies is currently working on an extreme sports automobile for wealthy clients. The RB17 is a Formula 1 car with fake wheels. The supercar will be constructed in 50 units at a cost of €5 million by 2025. The same is true for the racecourse version of the Aston Martin Valkyrie, which was created by Red Bull but is currently supported by Aston Martin. Both vehicles might be used to test mechanical and aerodynamic components that could be employed in Formula 1, saving both time and money. Once the cars are running, you could also collect track data. There are no regulations in place for this sort of vehicle. Nothing would have to be hidden by the different teams. They may freely demonstrate, for example, that the supercar's underbody is a carbon replica of the Formula 1 version. Nobody can tell the maker of these automobiles what should and should not be inside. A completely legal way to screw the competition over and test a multitude of parts without any costs. That is not conceivable with a Le Mans hypercar, such as the ones Ferrari and Alpine shortly have. There are rules in place that have nothing to do with Formula 1. It would be noticeable if Ferrari screwed an underbody comparable to the SF23 under its 499P for testing purposes. For the track, Ferrari would have to follow the same path as Red Bull and use a customer vehicle. Of course, Red Bull argues that when it comes to big concerns, information only flows from F1 to the hypercar, and that contact between the two departments is tightly monitored by the FIA. But who can show it doesn't happen the opposite way around? In a discussion in the canteen or the pub, the engineers are acquainted, because many of the technicians had previously worked in the Formula 1 section. They all speak the same language. It just takes a suggestion to determine whether or not a development is valuable. Data, drawings, phone conversations, or emails are not required. Nobody will be so naive as to leave a trace. It's a problem that the FIA virtually can't get out of, yet it goes against the spirit of the laws. Mercedes-Benz, Ferrari, McLaren, and Alpine continue to rely on the FIA's testing procedures and stringent interpretation of the rules. However, if every control fails here, totowolff thinks they will have to consider a similar concept. Mercedes would at least have its own supercar with the AMG Project 1. Finally, the best teams spend the same amount of money on all their activities and offshoot firms as they did previously. It just does not appear in the Formula 1 books. It appears to the outside world to be a lucrative enterprise, but it is not. And that is exactly why we're seeing the top dogs still on top, and how Aston Martin could rise from the ashes all of a sudden. F1, after all, is a dirty business. So it'll be interesting to see the results of the reports and what kind of punishment the teams will receive. At least everyone is on board on that part, and that is that if someone cheats, the penalty needs to be more severe this year. Even Ferrari team principal Frédéric Vasseur has warned that the joke penalty imposed on Red Bull for violating the 2021 budget restrictions threatens to allow widespread breaches throughout the grid. In response to questions, Vasseur stated, "A penalty like last year really isn't severe. If it should be necessary again, such a penalty should be much heavier. You have to keep in mind that a technical advantage will translate into a sporting advantage. Therefore, the penalty should be sporting and not a fine. In soccer, if you use a hand, it's a penalty. They don't give you a non-sporting penalty. The deduction of 10% wind tunnel time is a big joke. They've already done most of the work by then. A 5% violation is not small. It is big," Vasseur added. If you have a budget of 135 million, 80 million of that already goes to personnel, another 20 million to race costs, materials, brakes, and so on. Making 4 chassis at the beginning of the season also costs about 20 million. Then you already arrive at about 120 to 125 million. This is about the same for everyone. That leaves you about 10 million to develop. If you go a few million over your budget, then you should not look at the total 135 million, as has been said. We should collectively not shove this under the rug, because then you risk it being discussed at the table. There is a big difference between an innocent mistake or a choice. A bit like someone making a mistake on their tax return versus a company arranging something to avoid taxes in a tax haven. We have to be tough. This is about the future of the budget cap. Otherwise, everyone is going to do the same thing. Then you free up budget to pay the penalty and say amen. The big constructors can afford all this. What do you think? Have some teams broken the rules again? And what about the dirty ways to still develop the cars? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.